we're going to kick us off today. We have an LGS mom that's going to get us started. Amy Wagner, I've known her for a while. She's going to come in and talk about their experiences with some of the newer rescue meds that are out there. A lot of our kids experience clusters of seizures or seizures that don't stop. And, for the longest time, we had nothing. I remember being a frequent flyer at the ER, and then there was about 20 or so years ago, a rectal rescue, and now there's some newer ones out there. So Amy, come on up, and we'd love to hear your experience.
Good morning. First of all, I'm so honored to be here today. This is just amazing. The LGS Foundation has meant so much to me, and I feel like this is the first time I've met Tracy in person, and I felt like I needed her autograph or something. I was like, there's Tracy. So thank y'all so much for having me. I'm just going to tell a little story about our journey. So March 6, 2013 is a day forever frozen in my mind. It started out as just a normal Wednesday, work, school, evening softball practice for my then 11-year-old daughter, Lexi. My husband, Tim, was there helping me run the practice, and my son, Luke, was there. He was 5 at the time. As I was kind of running practice, I'd look around, and I saw Luke running around with all the other little softball siblings, and then I kind of looked over, and he was just kind of sitting there, staring off into space. And the next thing you knew, he was sound asleep. And I just thought, as a mother and a nurse, I kind of got a bad feeling. I thought, well, he's probably getting sick. And his behavior was just totally out of character for him. Little did I know that the journey that lay ahead of us would just really challenge me and my family to rise up. Like I said before, my name's Amy, and I would like to thank Norellis for sponsoring me to be here and share my story. That was 11 years ago. Lexi was in 6th grade, and Luke was at a daycare program at our church. My husband, Tim, worked a job as a telecommunications specialist, and I was a nurse at a busy trauma center. In my spare time, I really just enjoyed spending time with my family, and I coached all of Lexi's sports teams. So once we got home from that softball practice that evening, we had dinner. And then Luke and Lexi said they were going to go to the bedroom and play a video game. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up the kitchen. I baked some banana bread. To this day, anytime I smell banana bread, the memories of this night come rushing back. Tim was outside, and all of a sudden I heard Lexi yelling, "Hey, Mom, something's wrong with Luke." As I entered the room, Luke was bouncing on his knees, staring straight ahead and turning blue. His teeth were clenched, and I wasn't even sure if he was breathing at that point because he was turning bluer by the second. I started a rescue breathe for him, and as I yelled for Lexi and Tim, "Hey, y'all call 911. The paramedics and firemen, they arrived in 5 minutes, but it seemed like 5 years. Now, at this time, I've been a nurse for 15 years, and my whole background was ER and trauma. This is what I was trained for. But that didn't matter because this was my son, and I truly believed he was dying in front of me despite my best efforts. Once the medics arrived, Luke was breathing on his own, but he was very pale and not responding verbally to us. The medic said, he probably had a seizure. They took his temperature as 101. So they're like, it's probably a febrile seizure, which is caused by that sudden spike in body temperature. And I was like, okay. But we all decided it'd be safest to go ahead and take him to the nearest children's hospital via ambulance. And I rode with them. And on the way there, he had a smaller event, but it wasn't anything like the first one. Nothing really showed up in the ER, of course, and they said, but let's go in and admit him overnight just for observation. You'll go home in the morning. After a really uneventful night and expecting we'd get to go home, that morning he had another big event. We later learned that those were tonic-clonic seizures. They called in the neurology team, and we got moved to the epilepsy monitoring unit, the EMU. Luke got an EEG, he got MRI, another CAT scan, lots of blood work, and they captured many seizures on his EEG, but everything else was really just turning out normal. After 6 days, he was discharged home, and he was diagnosed with generalized idiopathic epilepsy. This just means that, the seizures were occurring from all different areas of the brain, and there were no cause for them. I honestly thought, okay, they gave us a med, he'll start on that med, it might change our life a little, and his seizures will be controlled. Was I ever wrong? To say the first year after his diagnosis was chaotic and stressful is an understatement. I always start to feel a lot of panic thinking about this time. Days and nights were just filled with anxiety, apprehension, daily seizures, nightly seizures, doctor visits, calls, hospitalizations, ER visits. It just went on and on. We knew it was so important to try to control these seizures because each seizure impacts the brain. But we were struggling to do that. Luke was having daily seizures, and we feared he would hurt himself every time he fell. I was busy over here trying to chart, trying to figure out his triggers, and I was like, I don't know, it seems like everything. I decided to homeschool Luke instead of sending him to kindergarten that year. That first year for me was very difficult personally. I loved being in control, and epilepsy threw a huge wrench into that. I just wanted the doctors to fix my Luke. His doctors continued trying, to try to find the medication that was the right fit, but nothing was working. Meanwhile, got this family, and they're all looking to me for support and comfort and advice, and to be honest with you, I was failing miserably in that department. I was still trying to do everything I had done prior to Luke's diagnosis, and now I had the added responsibilities of this full-time caregiving and homeschooling. Something had to give, so I eventually had to quit my full-time job to care for Luke. We took a huge financial hit, and it was really hard to leave the job that I loved. When Luke was 6, his neurologist called us into the consultation room. Being a nurse, I knew this was never a good sign. His doctor wanted to show us how severe Luke's EEG was. It had gotten significantly worse in the years since his diagnosis. But despite the severity of his EEG, we're sitting here and we're watching this EEG and we're seeing Luke on video. He's still putting together Legos. He's still talking to my parents in the room. The medical team that was in there, the epileptologist and the neurologist, they're like, man, this is pretty rare that he's still able to do this much with this EEG that looks like this. They're like, it looks pretty miraculous. I really couldn't help but agree. And I remember looking at my daughter and my husband who were in the room at the time, and just the way they looked. My husband was pale, and Lexi looked so scared, and I thought, you know what? We can't do this anymore. I made the decision right then and there that I was going to change my outlook. We just had to find joy. And no way was this diagnosis going to define Luke or our family anymore. I knew Luke was going to do something really special in this world, just wasn't sure what it was yet. At the age of 12, Luke was diagnosed with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. LGS is a severe and uncommon type of epilepsy. LGS is characterized by recurrent seizures of varying types and characteristic EEG changes and the intellectual impairments. The seizures did not respond well to medications. Cognitively, Luke was not declining, but he wasn't moving forward at all either. At this point, he had developed 5 different types of seizures. Seems like we'd start a med, we'd get a really good hold on this type of seizure, another seizure would rear its ugly head. He was having frequent falls, and he had many seizures during the night. Seemed like the only places we went were the hospital or home. The older and taller Luke got, the more we worried about him injuring himself when he fell from the seizures. Not many people realize how high the potential is for injury if the person isn't sitting down when they start having their seizure. They could potentially sustain bruises, burns, broken bones, and head injuries. At that time, we were using the Gastaut rectal gel, but it was invasive and difficult to administer, especially the bigger Luke got. I just wish we had something, that was easier to use, something we could use out, if we did get to go out in public, that we could use without the embarrassment. It was a very difficult time for us, and it was devastating to watch what my boy was having to endure. But we chose to find joy, even on those most difficult days. There's one place my family and I kind of draw strength from during those times, and that's music. When Luke is having a particularly bad seizure day, we play a lot of classical music and try to keep things kind of low stem. Luke is known for his epic dance parties in the hospital with the staff and the nurses. He also participates weekly in his music therapy, and he really loves that. There's one song in particular that I just kind of heard one time. I don't even remember when that was. And that song is Rise Up by Andra Day. To this day, whenever Luke is I have trouble getting him up in the morning, or he has to endure some testing he doesn't want to do, or take the medications, or just really any of his uncomfortable treatments, I always say, come on, Luke, it's time to rise up. I also use this song as my personal mantra to remind myself that I have to rise up and take care of Luke and my family. But it hasn't always been easy to rise up. There was a moment, I just wasn't sure if I could do it. In January of 2021, during COVID times, sitting alone with Luke in the hospital, his epileptologist came to me and she said, I know this is the worst timing, but I've got to sit you down and we've got to talk about this. It's a conversation that no parent ever should have to have, and it's like your worst nightmare. At that time, Luke had declined to being almost bedbound. His seizures seemed to be triggered by just almost everything. He was having many side effects from the medications, and he was developing allergies to a lot of the medications. We had also had a vagus nerve stimulator placed in 2019, so he had his VNS, and he had gone through 16 months of IVIG therapy. It just seemed like we were running out of options. We were open to trying any medications we could, but even his rescue medications simply were not working. He was declining, and it was devastating to watch. We were frustrated, heartbroken, and at a loss. His epileptologist then told me something had to be done, or Luke's life was going to be cut tragically short. Luke's risk of SUDEP was substantially rising. SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, increases in people that have uncontrolled seizures, especially when those seizures are occurring at night. Currently, no one knows the exact mechanism or cause of death, but it is important to gain as much seizure control as possible to lessen the chances of SUDEP. Now tell me, as a parent, how do you recover from hearing that? I knew we could either give up or we could rise up. So rise up is what we did. We ultimately came to the decision to have a deep brain stimulator, or DBS, placed in Luke. It wasn't an easy process, to say the least. At one point, months before the surgery, Luke was having parts of his brain stimulated to prepare him for the DBS. It was very difficult to watch, and I just the more I was watching it, I was just getting a sick feeling about it, and I looked down at the bed and I said, hey, Luke, you can stop this. Do you want to stop this? That 13-year-old boy, young boy, looked up at me and he said, no, Mom, I want to help other kids. Since his DBS insertion in 2021, Luke's seizures have decreased by 50%. And y'all, his quality of life has markedly improved. His team was also able to successfully wean him off one of his medications. This was a tremendous improvement. At the same time, I really still kept looking for ways that we could help Luke. Through my research and by word of mouth in the epilepsy community, I heard about a rescue medication for seizure clusters administered by nasal spray. That became available in 2020, and so in 2021, I sat my epileptologist down and we had the conversation about Valtoco, diazepam nasal spray for Luke. After discussing the risks and benefits, we decided to try Valtoco. Valtoco is a prescription medicine used for the short-term treatment of seizures, seizure clusters, also known as episodes of frequent seizure activity or acute repetitive seizures. This is all available for patients ages 6 years of age and older. Fortunately, Valtoco does have a copay card that really lowered the copay for us. That copay card was easy to obtain and use. I just went online, I filled out a form, showed that at the pharmacy. And so the reason I knew to look for that is Luke's neurology team had told us early on in his diagnosis that some of these medications have those copay cards. So we knew to look for one for Valtoco. So far, we've been very pleased with Valtoco's ability to control his seizure clusters with fewer trips to the ER and subsequent hospitalizations. We administer Valtoco when we notice a certain pattern in his seizures. Since Luke does have daily seizures, if we notice a seizure start occurring within a closer amount of time or the seizure type changes, then we know to use our Valtoco. This is just our experience, and others may be different, of course. Valtoco has given us a sense of comfort in being able to control those seizure clusters and to help prevent hospital visits and all those dangerous falls. Valtoco is easy to use. We've trained all our family and friends to use it. Now we feel much more confident in being prepared for these types of situations. Our family is now able to venture out, including a vacation to the beach last fall, and Luke got to fly on the plane for the first time to go to Epilepsy Awareness Day at Disneyland last fall. For 2 years in a row now, his treating hospital, they sponsored a seizure camp, a day camp, and Luke has got to go to that. And then we went to a family seizure camp where Luke got to do, with a lot of support, he got to go rock climbing and zip lining. This is all possible because we know there is a rescue medication we can easily use in case Luke needs it for his seizure clusters and to prevent those prolonged seizures within the cluster. You know, Luke still lives with his daily seizures, and as much as I want to change that, it possibly never will. He remains on 4 medications, and he has both his deep brain stimulator and his vagus nerve stimulator running. Luke is 16 now. Cognitively, he's about 7 years old. He lost many years due to those severe, frequent, and uncontrollable seizures. We realize now we can't control those seizures, but we will not let them control us. I tell Luke all the time, Luke, you have epilepsy, but epilepsy does not have you, buddy. Luke is quite the entrepreneur, and some things he finds joy in: raising money for the Epilepsy Foundation. His team is called Luke's Train Gang. So he has t-shirts made, he sells those t-shirts. We do the Epilepsy Foundation walk each year. He also runs a pet sitting business, makes and sells dog treats, and he runs a scrapping business. So he's the CEO of all of these, and Tim and I are his employees, and we never get paid a dime. So he's pretty with it, let me tell you. Luke loves trains. Oh my goodness, that's an understatement. He spends a lot of time in his train house, and he runs his model trains. He also loves to go train watching, and there's not a train museum we ever miss. We go to those. He's getting to ride his bike again. He's getting to play baseball again. And we're getting to go on vacations, something we didn't get to do at all for 4 years. Talk about joy. Our family motto is celebrate the struggle. We don't have a traditional life by any means, but for Luke, we all make it work. Now that he is more stable, I'm able to work from home, which gives me the flexibility to take care of him. We are also focusing on giving back to his treating hospital by volunteering, parent mentoring, and we're trying to improve the care of those with epilepsy by helping them find a sense of community. We live by finding joy in every moment, the good and the not so good. We rely heavily on family and friends for all that support. My husband is the best dad, and he and Luke are so close. My daughter's now 22, and she's gone into nursing because she wants to help others. She's now working as a registered nurse. She's the best sister to Luke and just remains his biggest fan. My parents, whom Luke affectionately called Gingy and Pawpaw, play a huge role in helping us out and just live like 8 minutes from us. Believe me, I know door to door, 8 minutes. You know what keeps us all going is Luke. He is brave, sweet, fun, loving, and a legendary prankster. You got to watch yourself. I always say he teaches me something every day. An example of his fortitude is when he was playing Miracle League Baseball one week. After the first season, he kind of talked me into staying in the stands, and he wanted to be on that field by himself, and it's a safe field, it's a safe environment. So he started having seizures. The first seizure he had, he fell down. The coach helped him up. He brushed himself off. A few minutes later, he had another one. So, of course, here comes Mom out on the field. Had another one, and I said, Luke, come on, let's go rest a minute. He looked at me, and he was like, no way, Mom. My team needs me, and I will never, ever quit. We're able to do this because we all have the peace of mind that if Luke needs it, we have Valtoco, and it has made him and all of us all the more confident. That is my Luke, my daily inspiration and my hero. I've talked a lot about Luke, so now y'all are going to get a chance to meet him real quick.
I've had about 4 of them interviews.
But this one is your favorite.
Live bar. My name is Luke. Even though I'm serious, I still go out and watch trains and ride my bike. I play baseball in my spare time. I want my station shop me, and you can watch your station shop view as well. Have taco.
Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.